could be argued we have three brains. We have a right hemisphere, a left hemisphere, and the many neurons that exist in our gut, about equivalent to a dog's brain. In particular, today I want to talk about this left and right hemisphere. Now, there are very informative ways of understanding these differences between hemispheres, written about in a brilliant way by Ian McGilchrist in The Master and His Emissary and The Matter with Things. And he describes various cases where people have had damage to the right hemisphere and the sort of many effects that can have on how people behave. Now, these include things such as when being asked to draw a clock, they'll only draw half a clock. Or being given their dinner, they'll only eat the food off half the plate. Or slightly more serious, when being asked about their arm, denying that it's their limb and saying it belongs to their mother or the doctor. And another example was where they're asked to draw an elephant. And with this damage to the right hemisphere, they could draw a trunk, they could draw a leg, a tail, different elements of the elephant, but they couldn't bring it together in any kind of coherent picture. And what does this tell us about the nature of the left hemisphere versus the right hemisphere? Well, the same exercise was given to somebody with left hemisphere damage. And when they drew the elephant, they drew a perfectly recognizable form of an elephant, but with less detail within it. So you can immediately begin to appreciate the different ways in which these two parts of our mind work. We've got the left that is very details oriented, that allows us to reach out, grab and manipulate the world. And then we've got this right hemisphere that sees the big picture, see how things slot together. There was a chance to again look at this hemispheric difference when Michael Gazzaniga, who was involved in those operations on people with severe epilepsy. Now they had potentially life-threatening fits, constant fits, and so the radical solution was to cut what's called the corpus callosum that joins these hemispheres together, literally sever the connection between these two parts of our mind. Now, it did actually stop the fitting. It saved their lives in many respects. And then there was this unique opportunity to see what happened when we no longer had this connection between left and right brain. And actually, if you just give information to the right eye, then it's the left hemisphere that will interpret that information, and conversely, left eye, right hemisphere. So they did many experiments. One in particular was a set of cubes with a puzzle. You had to create the image by using these different cubes. Now, if they had both hands, the hand governed by the right hemisphere would begin to solve the puzzle. The trouble is the hand governed by the left hemisphere kept messing it up because it didn't really know what it was doing. It only knew about the individual cubes. It didn't understand that it was trying to create a pattern with them all. Now, why do I talk about all these examples that illustrate this difference between left and right brain? It's because I'm interested in how we can use this information for ourselves to become our healthiest version of ourselves. So most of us don't have traumatic brain injuries, we don't have lesions on our brain, but nonetheless our lives can feel out of balance and things can be wrong and we don't necessarily know why. And I think this is part of the puzzle that we need to look at. So, for example, if we become overly obsessed with the details of our lives, or even So take a business situation where you're obsessing over KPIs. Maybe you're part of a team that's got to achieve certain results. It's got to tick certain boxes on that spreadsheet in order to be successful. Now, in the pursuit of those details, you can neglect the right hemisphere. You can neglect the fact that maybe team members have other things going on in their life. Maybe somebody's having a child. Maybe somebody else is suffering a bereavement. They're going through the stuff of life. But because you're just focused, left hemisphere, on those details, you're no longer appreciating that you've got fully formed, conscious human beings on your team. The right brain, which is the part that appreciates the whole and how these elements come together, is not being given the attention it deserves. And it is about attention. And fundamentally, the way the left and right hemispheres work can be called different modes of attention. So the right hemisphere is attending to the whole, whereas the left hemisphere is attending to those details. Now, we need both. Don't get me wrong, the incredible facilities in both sides of the brain. But the point is, if we overemphasize one side, particularly left brain, then we lose that sense of what is holistically right. And whether it's in a team at work or even just in our own lives, we can begin to obsess over, perhaps we've created a spreadsheet. I've got to do these workouts, these exercises, and, if as long as I do this, life will be all right. Now, let's say you succeed in that, but somehow you still don't feel right. Well, what else is going wrong? What else can I put on the spreadsheet? And in that process, you're forgetting that actually, as a human being, as a fully embodied piece of consciousness, you need the sun on your skin. You need to sit and appreciate a butterfly flying by, a bird sitting on a branch, a river running by, the way that music can tap straight into your emotions. There's just this myriad of human experiences that are so important to us. And the right hemisphere can recognize all of those elements that are important to us, like looking after the loved ones in our lives, showing them the respect, affection, love that they deserve. Whereas, if we look at even more severe cases where right hemisphere is compromised, it can get to the point where you no longer even see other people as human beings. So in severe cases, people with this right hemisphere compromise can actually just see people as automatons or robots, and lacking in any humanity. So this is an important distinction as well. The left hemisphere does not appreciate that sense of living being. It's there for the details. It's the right hemisphere that appreciates consciousness, appreciates the living vitality of other human beings, other animals, or creation around us. And so without it, the life literally drains out of our experience. So by looking at these extreme examples, I think we can begin to appreciate that unless we are consciously not only attending to the details of life, but also attending to the whole, lifting our heads above the computer screen, looking out of the window, looking at a view, a vista, at the mountains, at the sea, appreciating the full experience of our lives and the people within it, then we're not going to get that enjoyment, that sense of flow, that sense of vitality and positivity, that vibrancy that comes with that sense of truly living. And so I think for us to live a healthy life, we've got to make sure we're attending to that bigger picture. Make sure we're not just focused in just on the details. That has its place, but it has to have its place and not take over everything else. I mean, if we even think of this in terms of the march of technology, and AI, for example, is the big thing. It sort of landed a few years ago for most of us. I know there have been researchers in it for many years, but it landed for us with this ChatGPT, and it's exploding, and people don't know where it's going to take us. Will it achieve general intelligence? Will it decide that humanity's not worthwhile and get rid of us? We don't know. It's almost like this thing is so complex that we know we can't even control it at a certain point. And how do we arrive at that point? Well, we arrive there because people relying solely on their left brains, or predominantly, I should say, not solely, predominantly on their left brains, are trying to solve problems. They're seeing a system, right? How do we get this machine to do this? And then never taking time with the right hemispheric attention to say, well, should we be doing this? Is it serving us? Does it serve us to replace 90% of people's jobs with computers? How will those people then get their sense of meaning from life? No, and they haven't been asking those questions. It seems like we've had a group of very clever, extremely clever engineers solving problems and very much focused on those details without taking the time to step back and say, perhaps this is not what humanity needs. And we're not looking at the big picture. It's just, we'll do it because it can be done. Yeah, and of course there's other elements like the money motive and the gold rush that's involved with it. But again, even given that, even if you can make yourself the richest man on earth, is it worth it if you've destroyed the experience of humanity? Well, obviously not. Obviously not. I mean, so many studies now have shown that you get past a level, I think last time I read it was about 60,000 a year, get past that level and there's no particular increase in happiness. Once you've got your bills covered, a few luxuries taken care of, there's not much more to be gained. Okay? At least not monetarily. So what we're seeing is the effect of left hemisphere dominated thinking, causing an anxiety crisis for humanity as a whole. Now, I would always caution against becoming overly anxious or depressed or outraged or frustrated at the world's macro events that we have limited ability to influence. Instead, concentrate on what we can do in our corner of the earth, what we can do in our own minds. And what we can do is ensure that we are attending to the whole, that we are looking around us and seeing what needs to be done, not only in our own lives, our own health, our own physical health, our own mental health, our loved ones, what do they need, our community, what does it need, what do I have the power to affect? I can affect those things. My family, what do they need? Am I providing it? What more can I do to help? So we need that balance in our own lives. We need to attend with the right hemisphere and then use the amazing skills of the left hemisphere in its service to get done what needs to be done.